Good morning, sir, and welcome to the faculty induction program, which is being held first time online in the history of Nirma University. And thank you for accepting our invitation. So let me briefly introduce Dr. Prabhat Pankaj to you. He is the director of Jaipuria Institute of Management, Jaipur, and he's an economist by this thing profession. So he has been teaching economics. He's also done, executive higher education program from Harvard, and a case study has been written on Jaipuria Institute of Management, which is focusing on student engagement, where Dr. Prabhat has played a major role by initiating and incorporating both formal and informal learning into the student engagement process. So over to you, sir. You would have till 11:15. We would be having your session. So I hand over the session to you. And as I said, you are the co-host, so you can share your PPT also on the screen.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Nina.
you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nina, for a wonderful introduction. Keeping the time in mind, I would like to speak for about 30-40 minutes, and then I would like to have more questions from the participants if they have gone through the pre-reads and all. So let me just first share the screen.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so the screen is visible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So very good morning, all the participants. And I was told that this is the first time the initiative has been taken. As far as I know, Dr. Anup Singh, I worked with him for about 2-3 years when he was the director of Jaipuria Institute of Management at Noida campus. He is a thorough academician, a very profound thinker, and nothing less than this could have been expected from his side. So this initiative, when I was going through all the details of this whole program, I could see the imprint of his thought process. Now, I learned so much from his association. He started doing quite a lot of things in Noida campus, and that actually brought about a big change in academics mindset in Noida campus. My authority to talk to our faculty colleague about student engagement and higher education. It does not come from my basic discipline per se, because I'm an economist and have been doing environmental economics and things like that. It comes from my own experience as a teacher. So way back in 1991, I started my journey as a teacher when I started my career from Arunachal University as a lecturer. Uh, and then I worked for about 15, 16 years in the university system at different places. And then I left the university system and also gave up, about 3 to 4 permanent job in central university and state universities. Uh, I don't know why, but I kept on changing my jobs in the university because I did not uh, like the fact that you are stagnating, feeling sort of stagnating and not able to do much over there. So maybe I was searching for something interesting to do, something innovative to do, which these systems did not allow me so much to do. Uh, and probably I thought that private sector could satisfy my urge to do some innovations. So I joined the private sector. From last from 15 years about, I have been teaching in B schools. So I had the opportunity to teach abroad. I have been teaching in B school. I taught at uh, government universities. So I have a good mix of experiences of higher education, how it is happening at different places. So drawing upon that experience, that's number one. Number two, meeting with a large generation year after year of students. So from 1991, When I recall my days when I started teaching career, I found that the students' teaching style, their learning ways of learning, did not change much till 2000. Uh, I mean, roughly a cutoff of 2000 I'm keeping at the back of my mind. And after that, what I could see is that after every 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, you see a different batch altogether. Their whole style of teaching, the way they learn, actually changes. So there has been a rapid change in the way the students have started learning over the years. That's the point I want to make home. And this is a big learning for me because, for a teacher who started journey in 1991 and came up to 2020, how as a teacher I have changed over time as per the change in the generation, the learning style of the students, which I witnessed over time, is a big experience in itself. So that is one source of my, talking about student engagement. The third source I would like to say is meeting people like, Dr. Anup Singh. I saw what is his style of leadership, how he manages things. I met so many people uh, all through my lifetime. I met wonderful professors. I met wonderful colleagues. I also met worst kind of professors, which you can, within quote, you can say. Um, and I can explain to you why I'm calling it a worst kind of professor, but I have my own ways of explaining who is a good teacher and who is not a good teacher. Something of that sort. So I met good people, I met not so good people, and I learned from everybody. So these are the three basic sources of my learning. And inquisitiveness, has permitted me to go into the literature, read books. So I'll also share some of the good books with all of you as a new faculty member that has actually changed and had a profound impact on my being a teacher. So this is the background I would like to carry on with. Uh, and first of all, I would like to thank all of you for being a teacher, because being a teacher is the wonderful thing that you have chosen for yourself, provided you have actually chosen it for yourself. The question is that the professors who have actually come to these professions, not all of them are here by choice. Rather, a large chunk of professors who join teaching, they are by default. Uh, this is one, options out of many options they had, and this is just a job they are doing, and probably it's a fact of life. And there is a big difference on the teaching philosophy of the professors who have joined this profession by choice and the teaching philosophy of professors who have joined this profession by default or taking it as a job. So, you can see the difference between them. And therefore, you need to understand this particular subtle difference between the professors. If it is manifested in their teaching style, it is manifested the way they treat their students, it is manifested the way they actually plan for their own development. Uh, it is also manifested by the way they make the curriculum. And that's something that you need to understand, that this is the fundamental thing that makes a big difference, whether you have joined this profession by choice or you have joined this profession by default. But being a teacher is definitely great, with lots of responsibility. When I said with lots of privileges comes with a lot of responsibilities. So the crux lies in how we understand these responsibilities. So I have also seen professors who have actually grown over period of time. They learned from the circumstances. They probably, we can say that they have joined as by default, but eventually they accepted this profession and they assimilated themselves into the profession, the call of the profession, and they had gone beyond the call of duties and performed themselves as a teacher. So, this is also possible that we can learn and we can adapt ourselves. So that's the silver lining, and that's why I said that there is a lot of responsibility and privileges. I would like to have your reaction, maybe one or two of you, if you can talk about this equation which I presented in front of you. And this is about your view on education. So what do you think about education? So, is this classes plus textbook plus lecture plus examination plus, I've kept it a gap. What do you think that will come in the question mark is equal to higher education or education per se? That's what we are doing day in and day out. So any of you would like to comment on this equation? Just one or two comment from your side, and then we can move forward.
Good morning, sir. This is Mukti Jaiswal this side. It is
Okay, knowledge,
knowledge and understanding of the subject.
knowledge and understanding of the subject, but yeah, of course.
Observation,
Mhm.
observation.
Observation. Okay, good. Anything else?
Learning plus
Learning.
test of learning
Learning. Okay, so
plus
classes
test
are
of learning.
so classes. I'll ask you another
Interest.
question. Learning, you have pointed out very good thing, but I'll just ask you one question. Is it not covered under the classes? Learning is not covered under the classes. Do you think these
My,
are two watertight compartment?
I mean classes and textbook and lecture. Combining these three, I uh, term it as learning.
Okay, so the question mark is not learning. So what is the question mark?
Education. Yeah.
What about
Adaptation. To the student. Sir, adaptation.
Yes,
Adaptation.
adaptation.
Discipline. Discipline, sir.
sir? What about extracurricular activities?
Extracurricular activity, discipline. So I mean, of course, yeah. I mean, these are some of the dimensions of higher education that you have tried to put in over there.
Yes, sir.
And this is what you think that education must provide to our students, right?
Yes,
But
attitude
unfortunately,
towards learning.
hmm,
Sir, attitude towards learning maybe because
attitude towards learning. But when you give a degree to your student, do you really look at this dimension and you make it compulsory that your attitude has to be towards learning and then only you get a degree?
no,
No.
it's not, sir.
Yeah, that's what the point is.
Yeah.
So unfortunately what is happening is that question mark is the degree. Question mark is the degree. So you have classes, you have textbook, you have lecture, you have examination, and you give a degree, and that becomes higher education, which is not precisely. Many of you have expressed your view that it goes beyond it. You're talking about attitude, you're talking about learning, and perhaps when you said learning, you meant that the classes, textbooks, lecture, and learnings are sometimes two different things, and probably classes, textbook, and lectures should result into some learning of the students. So that's what you said. And then you said attitude, you said extracurricular, you said a lot of things. So, these a lot of things which comes to your mind is not covered under the traditional way, the way we look at the higher education. So that's the irony of higher education, where we think that the classes are there, textbook is there, lecture is there, examination is there, and we give a degree and it's done. Take a look at how it is changing. So this is the I've shared this with you, the full report. So the future of higher education, how technology will shape learning in times to come. So if you look at this report, I'm just bringing forth 3 points for your consideration. The first point that this report says is that can you put on mute? That will be nice if you all of you can put
Someone,
yourself on
yeah.
mute. Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Thank you. The first point I'm trying to make here is that technology has had and will continue to have a significant impact on higher education. And nearly two-thirds, that is 63% of survey respondents from both the public and private sectors say that technology innovation will have a major influence on teaching methodology in the next 5 years. If this is the fact, then how are we doing on this particular front? Are we understanding that the technology assimilation is important, or do we still think that it's not important? In what way we are preparing ourselves for the technology simulations. That's one big change that is going to take place. The second point is online learning is gaining a firm foothold in universities around the world. So here the question is that if online is the reality and is the fact of tomorrow, then what will be the role of teachers? What will happen to the in-class teaching versus the online teaching? Are you going to be there or are you not going to be there? Can students learn even without a teacher? That's the question I'm posing in front of you. I'm not giving any answer. So, due course of discussion, we'll have more answers to that. This is a very pertinent question. Can students learn even without a teacher? The third point it says is the corporate academic partnership will form an increasing part of the university experience. So, what it indicates is that in the given circumstances in times to come, when technology is going to be all pervasive and is going to disrupt the higher education in a big way, it's already started disrupting actually. The academic and corporate partnership is very important. So at the grassroots, I would like to ask you a single important question, which you can answer to yourself, is that as a teacher, how many HR professionals do you know in this country? Can you name them? Can you name 10 HR professionals which you know personally, whom you can give a call, you have made some correspondence with, or you know that, you know, if you call this person, he will come and interact with your students? If you are not, then think about it. You know, how the things are going to happen, how what kind of, you know, benefit that as a teacher you are going to give to your student. There is another report I would like you to pay attention to. It's called the Jobs of Tomorrow. This World Economic Forum report, and there is also ILO report of 2020 you should take a look at. It talks about different skills which are going to be required by the economy, in the economy and the market in times to come. Uh, and interestingly, if you look at all these skill set, the very important point to be brought home here for all of you to understand is, if you look at the set of skills they are talking about, hardly, you know, 10 to 20% of these skills can be taught in the classroom environment. Uh, and and surprisingly, most of these skills cannot be taught in the classroom environment. That's what these reports are talking about. Uh, is it not something uh, to be taken into consideration? Is it not something that we should be worried about, how we are going to adapt to this kind of circumstance? Are we going to stick to the classroom, or are we going to take our students outside the classroom for their learning? That's another question I'm leaving you with. So look at where the jobs are going to be. 37% in care economy, 17% in sales, marketing and content, 16% data and AI, 12% in engineering and cloud computing, 10% in product development, 8% in people and culture, and the green professions. A lot of jobs are going to come in green professions. We are talking about climate change, and so there are sensitivities to be accommodated, like, you know, people and culture, and green imperatives. Have we been able to incorporate this in our curriculum? Have we been able to develop our own capacity to teach these kind of things? I give you a very interesting example of how it works. So when it comes to teamwork and collaboration, you give your 5 students, you make a team of 5 students and give them a task. What is that they are going to do? They are going to come one by one to you. Typically, I'm speaking, not the exceptional circumstances in many institutions. Good institutions are doing it greatly. But typically, one by one, they will come and say, oh, I'm doing the work. My other teammates are not doing the work. And they will start complaining about the group. That's how the group works. And teamwork is an utter failure in our Indian context when we start teaching this to our students. That's very interesting to see how teamwork works among the students. But I'll tell you something interesting. I have also done this with my faculty member. Whenever I have given a job to 3 faculty members, let's say, to complete a job, invariably they also did the same thing. One by one, they will come and say, sir, I have completed my work. My colleagues are not doing it. You know, they are also demonstrating the same pattern towards the, you know, their sensitivity towards the teamwork. The valuing each other in the team is not the practice, but it's just the theory, right? But that's not the tragedy. The tragedy is that one of these 3 professors will go to the classroom and start teaching teamwork. So I'm taking a pause over here. Think about this. How does it going to work? How is it going to work? So the question is that the relevance, students are looking for relevance, and relevance can be established only by the professors who actually practice those. It's not by the professor who just preach those. So there is a difference between the preaching professors and a practicing professors. And if you look at all these reports and how the higher education is going to shape up in times to come, the more of a practicing professors are required rather than the preaching professors. So that's my way of looking at it. About technology, you have to decide how much you would like to digitize and how much you like to keep human, because if you look at all the tech giants like Google, Amazon, maybe Accenture, you look at any companies for that matter, you see how subtly they have actually decided how much to keep human, because their human element is so very overt and so very prominent. They thrive on that aspect. It's not the technology that makes them thrive, it's the human touch that makes them thrive. Look at Amazon, their practices. And therefore, this data of McKinsey suggests that by 2025, you're going to have more machine and less human. So 48% you will have human and 52%. So in education sector, this is from the market data, how it is going to be human versus technology. But in education, you have to decide, you and I have to decide how much you would like to digitize, how much you would like to make human. But if you decide and say that, oh, we are not going to make any digitization, that is going to affect the student learning. Why are we stopping the opportunity for the students to learn from Professor Stiglitz? So this morning at 7:30, there was a lecture by Professor Stiglitz. He's a Nobel laureate in economics, and one of my friend from Ajin Premji University was hosting this. He was comparing the program. So I attended that program. I also asked my son to take a look at and hear all the conversations. So we had 7:30 to 8:30 around, I was with. So now this is the technology, because if the technology would not have been there, my son would not have heard Professor Stiglitz speaking this morning. Uh, so if you wait for the classroom and Professor Stiglitz will come in the classroom and deliver a lecture, and then the students will hear, I mean, why are we depriving our students with this kind of opportunity? So you have to decide how much digitize, how much human you would like to keep. What is the reality? The reality is that the student tuition fee is a major source of revenue for the institutions you are in, I'm in, and even for the government institutions is getting true. And the endowment support is doing in India. There's no endowment support to the higher education by the companies, very less, unlike Americans. Even in America, if you look at the endowment support from the industries is very, very less, it's going down very fast. And the tuition fee is skyrocketing. So the cost of education on the part of student as well as the parents is rising like anything. So what is the return on investment that you are offering to your students? That's the question again. I'm leaving you with lots of questions. I don't have any definite answer to that, but I'm leaving you with a lot of questions. Is it just the CTC that the students are going to get in the first placement? Is that the return of investment you're going to offer to them, or something else you're going to offer to them as return of investment, like lifelong learning? So there is something called the stakeholder perspective, in which the consideration is made for changing to create value for the executives throughout their careers, rather than just at the age of 26 to 28. So when the students are there with you for 2 years, let's say, or 3 years, in engineering, let's say 4 years, or integrated program for 5 years, is that only the time period you're thinking of for developing your students, or do you also have a vision where you think that where the students will be after 5 years from graduating from your institution? Do you have that kind of vision to think about? Are you thinking of the transferable skills for the students, so that they can actually use it for all lifetime, which they are going to have after that? Are you thinking about their career, or are you just focusing on their jobs? There's a big difference between the two approaches. The moment you think them to be with you for 2 years, your approach is going to be very different. You have to make them pass, you have to make them learn few things. And the moment you think about the lifetime value creation, or confront the question that where they will be after 5 years, after they graduate from your place, you will be focusing a little more on the life skill and transferable skills. So we have three kind of paradigms in education that has emerged over time. So Emily Durkheim, he said that the education makes us better human being, and that's why education is required. Talcott Parsons said that education makes us productive, and that's why education is required. It may make us a better human being, it may not make us a better human being. And that's true also. All educated persons are not better human being. So, I mean, it goes without saying that Talcott Parsons was so right. But again, Jagdish Bhagwati said that education helps us in job access, and why we should be educated is the fact that we have to get a job. That's very interesting to look at. Uh, and Talcott Parson is wrong when he said that education makes us productive. We have seen a lot of educated people who are not able to write an application of one page correctly, right? They don't have the required skill, which is actually being enshrined in the degree, right? So there is no accountability of that degree. The degree is not worth lived by the candidate who has got the degree. So there is an employability gap, and it's a fact, right? So it may or may not make us productive, and it might make you super productive. So all these terrorists who are highly educated lot, some of them, and they are in destructive mode. So where is these paradigms actually working? So probably it forces us to think that Jagdish Bhagwati is right when he said that the sole purpose of education is to get a job and nothing else. But then there are two values that you deliver from education, and both are important if you look at all three of them together. One is called the instrumental value, which you can see on the x-axis, and another is called the intrinsic value, which is projected on the y-axis. So instrumental values like degree is an instrumental value of education. A job is in a way also an instrumental value, but intrinsic value is that it makes you a profound person. It makes you a thinkable person. It makes you an innovative person. It makes you a person who is going to walk into the society and make changes over there. So these are the intrinsic value of education. And you have, in my opinion, this is based on my empirical data. There are four kinds of students in your class. One is called the life skill seekers. Another is called the job seekers, degree seekers, and there is a lot who do not know why they have come to the higher education. What is that they are seeking for? And the behavior of these four students are very different. The life skill seekers is very high on intrinsic value and very low on instrumental. They are not looking at just the degree, they're looking at something more. And if you're not able to give them that more, they are actually become indifferent in the classroom. They will ask a lot of questions, and if you're not able to answer those questions and give them a better way of doing in academics or otherwise, they'll put themselves off, and next time you will see them not asking any question, right? Job seekers are fundamentally focusing only on how to get a job from the, and their purpose of life is get a job, nothing else. So they're not interested in anything which is called the life skill. They're interested more in what is going to be make them more employable. The degree seeker is more interested in academics, nothing else. So they are more interested in A plus, A minus, or whatever CGPA they get. They're more CGPA oriented person. You have 70%. Fortunately, in places like Nirma University, Jaipuria, you have 70% life skill seekers and about 30% degree seeker, and I don't know. But it's a combination of the two, right? And our job as a teacher is how we transform these degree seekers and the I don't know category into a job seeker at least, or a life skill seeker. The ultimate objective of any professor is to turn the student into a lifelong learner. That's the whole objective of a teacher. How do you do that? So we focus on learning, not just teaching. As you have rightly pointed out, that the classes, textbooks, professors have no meaning unless it results into the learning of the students. The students are not learning from your teaching. What is the fun of teaching actually? The purpose of teaching is what? The purpose of teaching is not teaching per se. The teaching per se is not the objective. How best teachers are you is not the objective. The objective is that how best the students learn from you is the objective, right? And then I will ask you, what is the purpose of learning itself? Is there a purpose attached to the learning itself? Why are you learning? You're learning to make some impact. You're learning to make some changes. You're learning to make transformation, or bring about transformation. The first transformation through learning you bring about is in your own life. The second transformation you bring about is the life of people around you, like your family, your relative, by earning a lot of good money, getting job. So you're transforming them. And the third transformation you must look forward is to change the society. Learning to change the society. Learning to bring about a change. So these are the purpose of learning. Learning per se is still not very definable. And therefore, the question goes like this: is teaching the goal of a professor? No. Is learning the only goal of a professor? That is also not true. What is the goal of the professor? The goal of the professor is to ignite the students in such a way to enable them to be a lifelong learner and make changes or bring transformation. That's the ultimate objective. But for the time being, students are there with you for learning and the campus experience. They're not there for you for the number of hours you give to them in the classroom. We are paid for number of hours as a professors, and just think about if the payment basis of the payment to a professor had changed, And instead of paying to the professor based on the number of hours they give, we change the basis to the amount of learning the students get should be the basis of the payment to a professor. And just imagine how discreetly and how differentially will be paid. Why every professor should get the same amount? Because we are paying on the basis of the number of hours they put. Is it teaching which is the focus of higher education? That's the question. So this is the book, very interesting book you can read. And therefore, we need to blend formal and non-formal learning. Learning is very interesting. How learning takes place. What is learning actually? We also need to understand that. Learning is actually, learning happens when you are able to change your thought process, when you are able to get yourself convinced with certain ways. That's how the learning takes place. When you start reading a book, let's say, take your own example, you must have experienced this. When you start reading a book, uh, you'll realize that, after reading a certain paragraph, you get a goosebump, actually, uh, because it's sinking into your psyche, it's going into your brain. You're being convinced with what is being written in the book, and that's why it gives you the goosebump, right? And therefore, learning is not just mugging. Learning is something that actually changes your thought process. Learning is something that actually makes you think about what is going to happen the next. So these are the inquisitiveness, and learning happens everywhere. Nobody has said that the learning happens only in the classroom. Learning can happen anywhere. How you and I learned in our life is about 70% outside the classroom, 30% inside the classroom. What you are today is because you learned outside the classroom, and it constitutes about 70%. One research on American university says this. 70% outside, average human being learns outside classroom is about 70%. So if we learn so much about outside the classroom, why are we trying to confine our learning of the students only in the classroom, right? There are a lot of spaces outside the classroom where the students can learn. They can learn in the corridor, they can learn in the cafeteria, they can learn in the open grass lawn, they can learn in the marketplace. Are we not thinking that these learning spaces should also be captured? And the moment you start capturing the outside classroom learning spaces, you need to think about blending the formal and non-formal learning. It has to be also a blend of cognitive and non-cognitive competencies, like something like your brain has to shake hand with heart. If a faculty, if a teacher is not able to shake hand, their brain is not able to shake hand with the heart of uh, the students are not going to learn from you. Remember, have you learned anything from a teacher whom you did not like at all? Or you just think about your own teacher whom you consider the best teacher of your life in the school time or in the college time? Just remember one or two teachers. You're not able to remember all the teachers in your lifetime. You remember just one or two teachers. And just think about, why do you remember this teacher for? You will remember this teacher for anything but the content that he has delivered in the classroom. And that's very interesting. That's very interesting. I had a teacher who asked me to write a paper in a conference in my college time. And I said, I wrote a conference because he knew that I can write, as a student also, I can write a conference paper. And my paper got accepted. And then he came to me and said, your paper has got accepted, let's go. It was December. I said, I don't have a warm cloth. How will I go? I was born and brought up in a very modest family. We didn't have electricity at home. I studied in the lamppost. uh, and we struggled to have 2 square meal a day. That kind of environment I studied in. So I said to my teacher that I don't have warm clothing. How can I go? He didn't say anything to me. And after a week, there was a knock at my door. And when I opened the door, to my surprise, this professor was standing with a coat in his hand. And he said, let's go. You know what? The job of a teacher is not to stitch the coat for the students. Do you think so? There is nothing written about it in the KRA. The job of a teacher is to go to the class and take a class and teach and come back. But you see, these are the teachers who are not going to make impact on the students. These are teachers who are not going, the students are not going to learn from. The students are going to learn the life skill from the teacher, like the professor who stitched the code for me. So you need to, your brain has to need, shake hand with the heart of the students. So what are the goals? In a teacher-centered teaching, our goal is to deliver the lesson. And in a student-centered teaching, we enable the students to learn the lesson. So this is a big paradigm shift. The moment you become student-centered from the teacher-centered, your paradigm changes. It's a U-turn actually. What are the words to remember here? In a teacher-centered teaching, the word is the sage on the stage. You come, deliver, and go. And in a student-centered, you have to act like a guide by the side. And therefore, the famous saying goes like this: a good teacher is not the one who teaches the class. The job of a teacher is not to teach the class. That's very euphoric, and that's very, something ironic actually, when you say that I have taught a class or I have a class to take. A good teacher is not the one who teaches the class, but a good teacher is the one who teaches every student sitting in the class. Can you see the difference between the two paradigms? When you teach a class and when you teach the student sitting in the class. So you're teaching a class, you're not bothered whether the students are learning or not learning. But when you're focusing on the students learning, you're not teaching the class, you're teaching the students, and each one of the students actually. And that becomes the student-centric, and that is the goal of education. That is the purpose of a teacher. So when you're taking a class, you're dumping the knowledge in the brain, and the student's brain becomes the dumping ground. And when you are focusing on each and every students in your class and trying to ensure that each one of them learn from what you are saying, what you are teaching to them, it becomes a second model where the learning with fun, learning with joy, learning with shaking hands, learning with talking, learning with taking initiative. Socrates' way of teaching. Socrates said in a class, who should ask the question? Is it the professor who should ask the question, or the student should ask the question, which is a good class? Most of the professors said that a good class is the one where the students ask many questions. Socrates said it's absolutely wrong, because if the students ask questions and professors answers those questions, this means the professor is taking a position where the professor is knowledgeable and the students are not knowledgeable. And the transfer of knowledge should happen from professor to the student. And that's what the class is all about. This is absolutely wrong philosophy of teaching. Socrates said it's the other way around. Is the professor who should ask the question. The job of the professor is to ask questions, and it is the students who should answer those questions, because it is the students who are to learn, not the professors. Right? And quite often the political economy of teaching says that as a professor, we are very comfortable in knowledge transfer model. That is, as a professor, I know everything and the students are the receiver of knowledge. That suits me because that creates a power distance in the classroom, where the professors are here and the students are here. And I enjoy that position because nobody challenges me. Political economy of teaching, a classroom. And therefore, Socrates' method, there is completely, U-turn in this whole model of teaching. And the students become a self-learner. And a good class is the one where you speak for not more than 30 minutes and 70 minutes your students speak. So just check. How are you doing in the classroom, whether the students are involved, not involved. So just check. Are you speaking for more than 90% in your class and the students are allowed to speak 10 minutes? Or are you speaking 10 to 20, 30 minutes, not more than 40 minutes, and 50, 60 minutes, more time you're giving to the students to speak? The more time you give to your student to speak, the better you become on student-centric professor. And students start, all of a sudden students learning becomes more. This is a very interesting book. I like this book so much. It talks about good teaching and the good teachers, and it says that we teach who we are. We are not going to teach anything that we are not. That's very interesting. Very, very interesting way of looking at what you teach and how you teach. And therefore, a teacher, teaching does not come from the knowledge that you have. Good teaching actually comes from the identity and the integrity that you hold for. Who are you as a person? Who are you as a teacher? Who are you as an individual makes you a teacher, not the kind of knowledge that you have about the subject. Of course, knowledge about the subject is very important, but it doesn't make you the best teacher. And we need to define, this is another book you can note down, it's called the What on Earth Am I Here For? You know, as an individual, are you sure about your objective? What do you want to become as an individual? What is there you are here for? What larger purpose you have to serve? So these are interesting questions. And this is another very interesting book you must read. It's called What the Best College Teachers Do. It's written by Ken Ben. It's one of my favorite teacher. So in this favorite book. So in this book, Ken Ben, what he has done is that he has actually interviewed 100 professors who are considered best by their students. And he asked set of eight questions. How do you teach? How do you evaluate? How do you treat your students? Something like that. So 8 questions. And then he compiled all these practices of what the best teachers do with their students in this book. It's very interesting. So it talks about, you know, something like you have to expand your horizon. You have to look beyond what the business as usual is as a teacher. You have to use a different set of innovative mix of pedagogy and things like that. Let's talk a little more about technology. Time is limited. I would have gone more and more on these aspects, but if you ask questions, we'll talk about that. This is another book, Teaching Naked. And what it says is that the moving technology has made every professor a naked professor in the classroom. And if you think that you're there with a dress, you're mistaken. What you're teaching, the students are verifying on the Google. They are quickly verifying all the facts and figures, and they actually can have more facts and figures than what you can supply in the classroom. So I did one experiment. I divided my entire course of microeconomics into 24 sessions. And then I decided 2-3 students, I allotted each topic to them in 24 sessions. And I said, these are the 3 students who are going to take care of this topic. So your job is to prepare the PPT content and come in the classroom. And the first 20-30 minutes you will speak. And after that, I will speak. That's what I did. This is the experiment I did. And know what? When I saw them presenting the topics, they reproduced the textbook so well. They made the PPT, which I would not have been able to make as a professor because they are more tech savvy. Their innovation in PPT was so good. And therefore, the conclusion was that, you know, they know how to read textbook, they know English. And the job of reproducing the textbook is not that of the professors. The job of the professor is not to reproduce the textbook. The job of the professor is to go beyond the textbook. And most often, our professors have the complaint that, well, the class is comprised of 1 hour or 1 hour, 30 minutes. I'm not able to finish the content, right? Therefore, how do you do that? You have to flip everything. I'll talk about that flipping, how flipping works. So you need to flip. So in this model of teaching, I flipped the class. I said the job, the content delivery is that of the students. And I gave them 30 minutes. And job the professor is to bring the relevance. Now I'm talking about the application of the concept that the students have actually deliberated or presented in the class. And I'm bringing a lot of examples, and it's not so easy because we are accustomed of delivering the content in the classroom and not focus so much on bringing the relevance in the classroom. So if suppose, remember, just imagine that as a professor, your job is not to talk about the theory. Your job is to talk about how the theory works in the practical world and bring lots of examples and evidences and data in the classroom, which the students cannot actually access. How will it be as a, what kind of effort that you have to put in to prepare your class? Just remember, just put yourself into that kind of situation and you will see that the job, the teaching is not so easy. all of a sudden. Well, we are accustomed of delivering the concept so much. You flip the class and it is possible that it can be done. You have to believe that your student can deliver. You have to have faith in the capability of your student. We have not tested those capability in the classroom. We have taken all the spaces, learning spaces, and captured that as a professor, because we have been doing it from time immemorial. We are good at that and we feel good about it, and that's why we had done that. So you have to leave those spaces and hand it over to your student and see the magic that is going to happen. Technology is going to make like this, is going to look like this. You know, the advantage of being in the driverless car is that you can read books also. But what will happen after it enters into the classroom? So the next frontier, after driverless car, there will be tuitionless, classes. So can students learn even without a professor? Answer is, in many ways, yes. But what are the things that the students cannot learn without professors? You need to focus on that. Say, for example, teacher-less class. So when you are talking about teacher-less class, the class is empty. There is no teacher, there is no professor, there is no students. And where are they learning? They are all learning outside. That's one model. The students and teachers are in the field. They are learning outside. They're not learning in the classroom. They're learning everything from practice. Another model is also less teacher model. The previous model was teacher less. This one is less teacher. So there is a difference between teacher less and less teachers. So bot is teaching and there is no human presence. You and I are not there in the class. Students are learning. But there is a teacher over there, and that teacher is technology. I'll introduce you with this interesting concept. Less teacher is called the hole in the wall project, and it was adopted in Delhi as a Khulja Sim Sim project. So what they have done is that in the slum area, they have put a hole in the wall and they fixed computers over there. You can see how computers are being used by the slum children. And there is no teacher over there to teach them computer. And after a couple of months, the data suggests that the students, all these children of slum area, they actually learned how to operate computers. Can you think about this question that can students learn even without teachers? You look at you have to have the faith in the learning ability of the children. They can learn without you. And one of the extreme views says that they are learning in spite of the teacher in the class. That's one extreme. I don't subscribe to that, but it is happening. Some of the teachers are so disruptive that they are actually killing the learning abilities of the students, let alone increasing the ability of the students to learn. Right? So think about this, what kind of role we should have. And this is my favorite model of teaching. It's called when less becomes more. You can see here, the students are learning. The teachers are not there. Teacher is not there. Students are learning. So I can tell you one very interesting example. When I was the director at our Indore campus, so I was staying in the campus itself. So at around 11:30, I just took a round of the campus. I was taking a regular round of the campus, and I saw light of the electricity of one of the classroom was on. So I thought probably by mistake somebody has kept it on. So I just approached that classroom to switch off the light. And when I reached the classroom, near classroom, I was so surprised to see that the class was actually full of students. The class at the 11:30 night, the class was full of students, and they were all sitting and one student was teaching the whole class. And he was a student from Bihar. His English was not good. He was actually struggling in his expression, but he was teaching operation research because he was good in mathematics. You'll realize this in your classroom when you start teaching, that some of the students are really, really good in one or two things. Some are very good in mathematics, some are good in this, some are good in that. What is stopping us to make this student teach the entire class? The peer learning among students is the best way they learn from. So think about student-to-student engagement as a model of teaching. Student-to-student engagement. As a professor, can we facilitate that? Student-to-student engagement as a model of teaching. and it's one of the best model I can vouch for in all my career. How I learned as a student was also by creating groups with my peers, and that changed my entire life. So why can't we also apply this to our class? As I said, time to flip inside out. Be keep an open mind and flip everything that you have doing. You just flip it. Anything that you are doing outside, you think that it can happen outside, bring it in the classroom. And anything that can be done in the classroom, take it outside the classroom. Think about it. It will change the entire paradigm and the way you teach, and you become a wonderful professor. You need to put a little bit of emphasis on HOTS. HOTS is called the high order thinking skills. So our job is to inculcate high order thinking skills in our students, and it is incorporated very well in the Bloom's taxonomy. And it's also called the purpose driven learning. It's called the purpose driven learning. So you have to start with the question why, how. These are the questions. What? These are the questions that you have to ask before you create your curriculum, before you teach something, before you choose your pedagogy. What is that you want to do? Why you want to do this? What is that the students are going to get from it? Say, for example, are you going to stick to remember skill of the students, or understanding skill of the students, or go up to the creating skill of the students? That mix you have to decide, because it depends on the class that you have, the level you're teaching, the purpose of teaching, the learning outcomes that you frame. It all depends on that. But higher order thinking will always involve something like creating, evaluating, and analyzing, the first three orders, the highest three orders of Bloom's taxonomy. And then you also have to think on the levels at which you would like to carry it. Are you going to stick to the factual level, conceptual level, procedural level, or metacognitive level? So you have to decide what is the level of learning you're advocating for your student through your curriculum, and at what style or at what level you want to take it to. So depending upon that, you choose your own verb and talk about it. Say, for example, if you are focusing on apply, which is procedural, then do something which they can carry out. Carry out means they are applying, and they are applying at the procedural level. But if you're using the verb like using in your pedagogy, that the students will be able to use it. That means you are actually focusing more on apply skill and at the metacognitive level. So advantage of the metacognitive is that it actually creates life skill in the students, and it also creates the transferable skills in the students. If they're able to apply something at the metacognitive, this means they will also be able to use it in some other field, not only the field you're advocating, asking them to do, but they can use it in other fields as well, and that makes them lifelong learners. This table is very critical. You need to think more, and I can go on talking about hour to hour on the table itself, but I'll give you one more slide to you, which is called the Dale's cone of experience. And this is very revealing. You see that 10% of people generally remember 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, 30% of what they see, 50% of what they hear and see, 70% of what they say and write, and 90% of what they do, right? And then if you look at the Bloom's taxonomy, the analyze, design, create, and evaluating, and if you make your curriculums based on these higher order thinking skills, then you're going to actually ask your student to do a lot. But if you are saying that I'm focusing on analyze, but I'm not asking my student to do, that's a mismatch. You can't afford that mismatch. So you have to select the right kind of pedagogical mix, the right kind of design, which is commensurating with the right kind of the skill that you would like your student to develop. So that's the beauty of a good teacher. So you need to understand this aspect. Last slide. The few common characteristics I found of Harvard professor when I was in Harvard, I found them very energetic, very energetic. So energy, there's no compromise on energy. Energy has to be the protoplasm of what you do, because energy level is contagious. If you supply X amount of energy in the classroom, your student is going to supply X minus 1 amount of energy in the classroom. But if you look dull and you present yourself in a dull manner, your class is going to be absolutely dull. Somebody asked me, can you tell me what is a good class? How do I know that I have conducted a good class? I told him that, it's not a rocket science. At the end of the class, every teacher knows that he has conducted a good class. It's written everywhere on the faces of their students. And you can see the face of your student and you come to know whether it was a good class or not a good class. A good class is the one where the students will actually be on the edge of their chair. They will not sit quietly. They will not have even the time to take out their mobile and talk and do crosstalk. They will be on the edge of their chair. The kind of energy that you can put into the classroom, there should not be any compromise on that. There is a book which is a very famous book, and it's my favorite. It's called The Last Lecture. It's also written by one of the Harvard professor who died of cancer. So Last Lecture, if you find, you should read. So this professor knew that this is going to be his last lecture of his life, because his life is no more, and this is perhaps the last appearance he's going to make in his class. And the kind of preparation he did for that class, if you know that it is your last lecture, what kind of preparation will you do for this class? You will do every inch preparations. If you will do preparations for each and everything that you're going to do in the classroom, it's orchestrated, it's almost like complete orchestrated class that you will create for yourself, right? Why can't we think that every class that we go is the last class of our life? If you treat every class as a last class, you will see the magic which is going to happen. And they're very engaging, very engaging. They're very respectful to the participants. They will not let down any participants, whatever they say. And therefore, the statement goes that there's nothing called the bad students. There's always a bad teacher. A best comparison which I would like to make of a teacher is with a gardener. This is the best comparison we can make for a teacher. A gardener, what he does, he brings the sapling, he puts it in the ground, he gives water, manure, and the sapling dies. Whose fault is this? Is the sapling's fault that it died? Or is the gardener's fault that he did not perceive the right mix? Probably he did more manure, he put more water, less water, right? Not taking care of the sapling rightly. And therefore, there is a sense when somebody said that there is nothing called the bad student, there is always a bad teacher. Very respectful to the participants, and they will do a lot of pre-logistic work. So what I found was that if the class starts at 10, these professors will come at least half an hour before in the class. Can you imagine? We come at least 5 minutes late in the class. But I never found any Harvard professor coming late in the class. They will be 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour before in the class. And what do they do in 15 minutes before they come to the class? They will check the duster, they will check the chalk, they will write something on the board. And you'll be surprised that, when the class starts, they have already written at least 30, 40 points on the board. And they will keep it in hiding. And when the time comes, they will open it. And you'll be surprised, it's already written over there. Professor is not writing in front of you. They do so much of, pre-work in the classroom. Just do one thing. I have experimented it in my class and it worked so well. Just come 5 to 10 minutes before the class starts. Stand at the gate of the classroom. And when the students come, just greet them or shake hands with them and ask them to come inside the classroom till the last student enter your class. Just do that. And see the change in your student. Just see the change in your student and their behavior, their pattern of learning. Everything will change so much. They will be more careful listening to you. They will emit a lot of learning aptitude towards you. They will start listening to you. Just do that. It's a very small experiment. There are many experiments that you can conduct and make your student learn. Make the rules of participation very clear in the beginning itself. So how the discipline is maintained in the classroom is called the scaffolding approach. The scaffolding approach, when you create the scaffolding, you create that, and when you remove them very slowly. You don't remove them all of a sudden. So the prescription is that you have to make your rules very clear in the beginning itself, in the first class, that you want 1, 2, 3. These are the 3 things that you want for the sake of discipline in your class, and no compromise on that. No compromise on that. Be very strict about this discipline in the beginning. But if you want to enforce some new rules in the middle of the course, it will not work. But if you do it in the beginning of the course, it will work. That's very interesting about human psychology. So give fair chance to everyone to express the opinion. So, you have to respect everyone. Nothing can be worse for a teacher than to look biased or becoming a bias or create some biasness in the classroom. Don't ever think about creating any kind of biasness in the classroom, or consciously you have to be look very unbiased in your approach, in your way, in your teaching, you're treating the students, because the moment you are perceived as a biased teacher by your student, your whole existence as a teacher is finished. You will not be respected at all among the students. Participants will be very well prepared, but that's the kind of students that we have there, because they have been molded like that. So you can also make your student prepare before they come to the class. There are many ways you can do that. Frequently engage participants in side discussion. So that means allowing the participants to talk a lot. And therefore the whole idea is not to take more than 50% spaces in the classroom, and allow more than 50% spaces to your student in the classroom. So that's the idea. So I'm ending here. So I would like to hear more from you. This topic is so dear to me. I can talk hours and hours on every aspects, but I would like to stop here. So,
Sir, I have
I
questions.
have a question.
yeah.
Yes, Dr. Abhaykant, you can carry on.
Sorry.
Let me
Sir,
answer this.
you have spoken about Harvard University. Sir, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm just trying to unshare this. Let's see, because stop sharing. Yeah, no, yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, you have spoken about Harvard University, where there is such an infrastructure for every teacher. There is a separate classroom and other things. Here in our country, one teacher is waiting outside and another teacher is about to leave the classroom. How can we think of entering in the classroom half an hour or 10 minutes or even 15 minutes prior to the entering, prior to the gentleman who is teaching is leaving the room? Classroom, sorry.
So 2 things. I understand I have appreciation for the fact that you have said, but it's doable. It's not that it cannot be doable. It's you and I have to do it. So timetable is all made by us only. Is the professors who make the timetable, is the departmental in charge who makes the timetable. So you can create that timetable in such a way. I don't think there is going to be any class like one is coming and another is entering. At least there will be some 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes break in between. Then only the class
No,
will
sir.
happen.
It's not like that. It's not like that. It's there. We are continuously. Break is some after certain intervals, but not from one class to another class. Like morning 9 to 10 and 10 to 11, regular class. Then 15 minutes break. Then again 11:15 to 12:15 and 12:15 to some 13:15 time.
I don't
Like that.
know. I don't know. I will not be able to comment on that, because, but I think it is possible, because all of us make the timetable. If it makes sense, all of us can decide that let there be a gap of 10 minutes and we can do it. It depends on how you manage your own affairs. But I don't know how it is being managed at your end or somewhere, but it's maybe a good idea to have a 10 minutes break in between the class.
Sir, I think
Sir,
if
I have a
without
question,
Class
sir.
size.
respond to that,
Class size. Oh, please, madam.
if I'll just respond to that, I think it's because though we have a 15-minute break, but the previous, let's say, faculty would, take some extra time. And then obviously the second faculty doesn't get that 15 minutes to step in.
So
So
it's not a
if
big
that
issue that
spillover
we
would
should
not
focus.
happen,
Yeah.
if we manage our time, I don't think that.
Dr. Nina, it's not a big issue that we should focus on our time, devote so much of time. It's just a matter of understanding. It can be resolved.
Yes.
It's not that
Yes.
something that cannot be resolved.
That's what I'm saying. I think if all faculty were a little conscious about this
Yes.
fact that I need to end on time, maybe that 15 minutes
Yeah,
could be
sure, sure.
given
So
to the second
it's up to
category.
us. It's up.
Programs in Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So
Correct,
some of the
correct.
largest programs are funded by defense corporations like RAND corporations and others in various university departments. And that money doesn't only restrict itself to the departments of, say, information technology or other, it also flows out to liberal humanities and social sciences and other departments. Because all the departments in a particular institution cannot earn that much funding or secure that much funding on their own. So there is in some ways, so there is an institutional design whereby if some departments on the basis of their industry credibility is securing more funding, they need to have an access of flow to other departments as well. So yes, you are right in saying
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So
Thanks.
what we can do as a professor is that we can look at those institutions where the non-fee funding or non-fee income is very high, and we can look at their models, what they are doing, how they are doing, and then we can learn from them. So that's the least we can do. So I would like to answer one question. It's not a question; it's an observation by Mr. Raja. He has written Abhay Raja.
Yes, sir.
He
Yes, sir.
has put it in the chat box. So class size. This is about the class size that you have written. So in Harvard, the class size is also very high, very big. Sometimes even 300, 400 students are there in the classroom. So the class which I was there, it was comprised of 120 people. So
Okay.
so large size is not is a problem. Sometimes we have this issue that if you create a big size class, then learning is not possible. You cannot teach. So the methodology of teaching has to be different when you're teaching the large class. Can you conduct a case study in the large class? Actually, I will say that conducting a case study in large class is much better and much more engaging. But you need to know how to conduct the case study in the large class. So the pedagogy and the methodology will be different for the large class and the small class. Learning has nothing to do with large class or the small class, that the student will learn better in small class, will not be able to learn in the large class. It's not so. But it's only the way you teach has to be different. But in Harvard, they are teaching large classes. You know, that is very common, normal.
The second
Okay.
question is again. Probably as you said earlier, that our business model is, based on the tuition fees, all the institutes. And yesterday also, I asked the same question to our executive registrar also, that if we get chance, if any company approaches us for the consultancy, even UGC gives only 3 points for the consultancy. So don't you think that while giving the interview, at the time of interview, they ask that we need a industry wala banda who has the knowledge of industry. So how to keep updating our knowledge? If the
What
yeah,
is your good name?
myself Priyam sir, Priyam.
Priyam. So Priyam, let me answer this question in a very perspective, because it's not the question of one person like Priyam. It's a question of all the professors in India. So they will always say, oh, the regulators, they send a different signal. The director and the director general, the vice chancellors are giving different signals. And as a professors, we have to go by that signal, right? So there is no scope. These regulatory authorities are actually killing the creativity and the professor. That is the problem that we are facing. Of course, I agree with you. There is something called a stoic response. My answer is very different. I may be pardoned for that. There is something called the stoic response. I am a very firm believer of happiness research. I do happiness research, and stoic response is one part of the happiness research. Stoic response says that there are things which are under your control, there are things which are not under your control, right? So you can either be a lambasters and be a critic of the system, or be a doer, right? So there are two different breed altogether, right? So I, for one, as a professor, I would not like to be a criticizer only, that the system is bad like this, bad like this, bad like this. Of course this is bad, but there are a lot of things which you are not never stopped by any system, and no system can actually stop you from doing that. Say for example, I tell you, coming coming on time, entering the class on time, is it regulated by UGC? Teaching well in the classroom, is it regulated by the UGC? or any vice chancellor, he says, oh, don't teach. Why are you teaching so well? Doing a good research and relevant research, is it stopped by UGC? Whether they give you a point or don't give you a point, give a damn to it. Suppose you have done some research which does not fall under the UGC's criteria, forget it. Have you ever seen any person who has done research only for the points? If you are doing only for the points, that means you are not that kind of a professor who are by choice in this profession. A good researcher will never do a research only for the point. Rather, the Nobel laureates have never cared about whether somebody is giving them a point or not giving them a point, right? The recognition for your work will come ultimately. Nobody is stopping you to earn money from your research, but whether your research is of that caliber or not, whether the industry is buying your research or not, that is something that you have to see. So there are a lot of things actually which is under your control, and these are called the hygiene factors of a professor. So if you start looking at those hygiene factors of the professor, you will all of a sudden realize that the system is started changing. So I'll tell you something how it changes. As a director, if a professor comes to me and says that, okay, can you do this, it will help, right? That is one way of doing it. Another way is that a professor comes that, okay, look, I'm doing this. Can you help me in this manner? I'll be more with this professor who actually comes and put the things on my table and says, I'm doing this and I'm facing this problem. Can you sort it out? I'll say, yeah, of course, I'm for you. I'll sort it out. Right? So something of this sort. So system is, whose system is it? Is it anyway? This is all the system by us. We make the system, right? If you start doing, system will ultimately start changing. For the sake of academic discussion and debate, you can say, oh, regulatory framework is bad in our system, how this is bad in our system, how that is bad. And this is how, you know.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prabhat. Thank you. It was a very, very interesting session. I am sure we have all benefited by it. So we look forward to more sessions with you in the future. Yeah. And thank you on behalf of the university, on behalf of the participants, and my personal behalf for taking time from your busy schedule and being with us today.
I love
thank you.